Dr. Shane, thank you so much for coming on tonight's podcast at Lost Property.
Great.
I want to start with the amount of files you have on your back, behind you, and what's going on behind you?
My first degree was in engineering, and one thing engineering teaches you is how to be methodical. So the files you see at the back are the active jobs that EG is currently doing, that I'm involved in. And there should be 19 of them in alphabetical order from A to Z, so that I can locate each file. Now, I like to write each of the files personally because I found that a bit like of the Pavlov dog experiment, if you know what that is. There's a reflexology item in my brain that as soon as I've written the file, once I've opened it, I can remember the contents because I remember putting it in there.
Wow. And is that what you have is that why you have a different ornament on every single file?
Yeah, they're the stages that each project's up to. So I have a visual cue on whether this is at the end or the middle or the beginning of its cycle.
So many questions. That's incredible. Have you seen? I think Darren Brown uses the Pavlov theory. Does that? He masters the art of walking into a room, and he explains how in that room he is going to use certain items to remind him of certain cards. And so then he gets people to show him a certain amount of cards, so they shuffle it.
Right.
And he gets them to show a certain amount of cards, and then each item is going to remind him of a certain card. And he uses that like a cue, like you've used. And then he can go through and he talks about card counting and showing how he uses
Fascinating. No, I haven't seen that. But there you go. There's a bit of whoever he is in me, I think.
Yeah. So look, if EG, I know it's already worked out for you in many ways, but if you know the retirement plan years and years from now means that you can count cards and go to a casino, then
that would be a skill. That would be a real skill. Yeah, no, I think in my retirement plan, I'll probably do more lecturing at university. I already lecture and I'm a professor at 2 universities, Sydney and New South.
Wow.
I lecture final year engineers and project management, and I mark thesis students for final years. That's something I enjoy. I did 122 face-to-face hours last year, and was ranked at both universities. At Sydney, 1 out of 77, best lecturer out of 77. At New South, 1 out of 88.
Wow.
Yeah.
What do you think goes into getting you that status, best lecturer?
I think I'm a little unique for the students, perhaps, because I don't lecture just on the subject material. So my view is, if you're doing final semester, final year with me, if all you're doing is regurgitating to me what I'm telling you, if that's all you're doing, I mean, there's a certain amount of that's necessary to do well in the exam.
Sure.
But if that's all you're doing, then you're really not a final year student. A final year student is someone who's ready for a leadership role in the industry 2 months after. And so my lecturing style involves anecdotes from, Roman emperors, the British Empire, French colonialism, and being totally free about just bringing in proverbs, talking about, Elizabeth I or William the Conqueror, and just bringing that all together with the material that's got to be lectured in law, economics, finance, engineering, project management. And because I've had 32 years in industry and in 3 different disciplines, essentially in engineering, where I built lots of stuff, in land economics, where I evaluated lots of stuff, and the last 20 years in zoning and planning, where I've rezoned some of Sydney's most prominent projects. And change their legal zoning. It kind of all comes together because by final year, Elliot, you're kind of a professional who's ready to be unleashed onto industry, and you've studied a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of engineers would do maybe I don't know, 62 courses at university in the 4 years. And if you're doing a double degree, that's probably up to 70 or 72. So they've done a lot of stuff, particularly maths and physics and permutations of those,
So, I mean, as a final year student going through their exams, is that something that obviously you've lectured them on the entire way through, not just what they're studying, but a whole philosophy and a background into everything else that you've
they like that. They like that. So like I'll walk in and say we're doing a lesson on project formulation. And I'll walk in and instead of just reading I never ever read the lecture notes.
That's great.
Meaning the lecture notes are headings in my slides, and I basically talk to those headings. But I don't do them I don't verbatim read what's on the screen, because I think you can always do that afterwards. And plus, all my lectures are recorded. So if you ever miss anything, you can go back and listen to it. So my view is this idea of the old-fashioned, super read off the screen stuff is terrible. And what I do is I'll just walk in and say, right, all right, men and women, what do you think is the single most important thing about getting a project approved? What is it? Name one thing. Doesn't matter if it's wrong. I want you to yell it out. Put your hand up so we don't talk over each other. Just put your hand up. Tell me what you think. Doesn't matter if it's wrong. Just give me an idea. So, and then we get started with that process of thinking. What do you think is the single most important thing? What do you think is the next most important thing? And we're financing a project. What sort of approvals do you think we need to get a project financed? And they'll say, you need money. I said, no, if you need money, then you won't get money. The whole idea of the bank giving you money is that you don't need the money. Yeah. That's the whole idea. Otherwise, they're not giving it to you.
Well, you can definitely repay it at some point.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. If you don't really need it, that's when you can have more of it.
Yeah.
And then I talk about the difference between debt and equity. I talk about the approval process, how the planning system works. I talk about how projects come together. I give real live examples. And I've lectured at Harvard twice.
Wow.
Yeah. I've lectured at Shanghai Jiao Tong once. That's China's third highest ranked university.
Yeah, no, I've heard of it.
Yeah, interesting. And I've lectured overseas in the Middle East twice, in the Lebanon, which is my country of birth.
Well, that's incredible. You've obviously traveled to multiple destinations, and is it the same process and the same methodology that you use in every country, or do you adapt?
Conceptually, the same, but the details change because the system of governance changes.
Of course, yeah.
And of course, you have all the nuances that come with each of the cities and the nations. So even in Italy, which is a Western country, to talk about changing land use in Rome is very different to changing it in Adelaide. And the reason is that Rome is governed by a 2,000-year-old city that has got all sorts of very poorly designed streets because they were designed for two chariots in the first century by Trajan.
You're not building a double lock-up garage near the Colosseum, are you?
Exactly. And you see, the fabric of the old cities is difficult, but it's actually easy because it really gives you the theme with which you have to work. The modern cities are hard and easy. So the modern cities allow you a lot more latitude, but they've got all these zoning regulations, and our zoning is US-based, and our planning is British-based. So we've united two fairly difficult systems and made them super difficult in our city. Yeah. So that's how Sydney's planning system functions.
You said there before that when you're teaching students that you said, raise your hands, whether you're right or wrong. Do you encourage people and create a platform where people can make mistakes, whether right or wrong?
Yeah. And that means I don't say, wrong, Elliot, wrong. And I'll say, well, not really. And if you kind of get it wrong, I'll ask you another question. So do you think that debt is more important or equity? So do you think that building the foundations first is always what we do in a building? Do you think blah? Do you think the subsurface conditions matter more or the above surface conditions matter more? So I'll take you to the answer eventually, and then what I'll do is I won't embarrass you. I'll just move to the next student that's got their hand raised and get another opinion. And so it's in that process of interactivity. And the way I've done my assignments and what I instituted at university is I instituted a system where only 50% of the mark is the exam, 20% is the assignments, and then 30% is given to a technical live presentation that's done in groups for a complex issue that I give you for everyone to do, and they do it in groups of 10, and each member of the group's got to get up and present. Sure. And I bring 3 leaders from industry who between them have judged 10,000 presentations. And I asked them to help me judge the students, and the top group gets a high distinction and the second group gets a distinction. So because in real life, it wouldn't matter, Elliot, if you had the greatest idea or not, if you can't see it.
Yeah, of course.
And half of the sell is internal and half of the sell is external. So if I had a great idea for $10 million, the first thing I've got to do is convince my co-directors at EG that we're doing it. Now, I've got to understand what every question that's going to be asked is going to be and what the answer to it is.
Yeah.
Right? And then I will get it through here, and then I will take it to the bank, and then the bank will agree with it, and then I'll get the money, and then I'll buy the site, and then I'll do the project. Yes.
But first you got to convince your partners.
Correct.
Yeah. Correct. And how does that go?
Well, it has its moments. I'm usually pretty good at this. I'm well rehearsed, but essentially, you know what doesn't fly and what you can't get up.
Of course.
It's also the same when you're presenting to a bank, or when you're presenting to a committee, or when you're presenting to a council. I basically know where the strengths and the weaknesses of that argument actually is. And I've got to be ready for the questions that get asked. And preparation is everything. It's like going to battle with your troops. They've got to be ready for that battle. It's like taking a team of players into the state of origin.
Yes.
If you just think you're playing the under 14s, you've got another thing coming. You've got to expect some of the biggest hits on the field, and you've got to expect that your rival coach has done a lot of set moves and rehearsed a lot of outcomes. And you've got to be ready for all of it.
He knows your outcomes, and he's reviewed the tapes, and he knows what your best player is going to do. And so skill is only going to take you so far. Hard work and changing up a plan or doing something different is going to get you that state of origin win, which is huge over here on the East Coast.
That's it.
Yeah,
that's right. And so we, I think, teach students a lot of really good stuff at university. The tertiary sector is, I think, the most exciting out of the 3 sectors for me, from my personal view. Not that primary and secondary are not important, but I think what's really exciting about the tertiary sector is we're taking men and women who are still transforming from boys to adults, or from girls to women, and making them into professionals that are ready to lead teams of people. And I think that is just one of the most beautiful and exciting phases in a young person's life. That final, and think about it, Elliot. If you have no name, let's say you have no first name and no surname, and you have no profession, you almost don't exist.
Yeah.
Imagine if you did nothing. Let's say you practiced no charity and you had no job, you had no education. You and you don't have a name. You actually don't exist.
No, of course.
So actually, your name defines you in some way.
Yeah.
And your vocation, what you do, what you studied, what you know, that defines you in another way. You're Elliot the carpenter, or Elliot the tank expert, or Elliot or Elliot the musician, or the oboe player. You become that person.
That person. And I was the person in high school that's the guy that was always late. Oh, there's Jimmy the late guy. He's always late. Jimmy's always late.
Well, that has advantages if the plane's going to crash.
Well, which is exactly why I was late. Trying to tell that to my principal was obviously slightly difficult.
I wasn't impressed.
How have you seen? How long you've been teaching students for? Has that changed over
15 years.
Wow. How have you seen that the thirst for information and growth has sort of changed over the years? Has students become...
The engineering school, the program hasn't changed very much.
Okay.
Meaning we still teach all the really hard core subjects, the structural analysis and structural behavior, but we've introduced more management subjects, I think, which has been very good, which
Sure.
are very, very important, because most engineers don't actually end up in design. More than 2/3 of them end up in management.
Right. That's
And
interesting.
it's a brilliant course for structuring, problem solving types of thinking, which
Yes.
are very useful in almost anything. If you think of Ziggy Switkowski, who ran Telstra, he was an engineer. So it's all about. So it was a telecommunication company, but he was an engineer, right? So it's really about problem solving and structuring, and understanding events and reactions, and managing those appropriately. So, and the standard of candidate is in the undergraduate course very good. Actually, we now have I think an entry mark of 92 for pure engineering, and about 96, 97, depending on which combination. You could do engineering commerce, engineering law, and that's, I think, 98 engineering law. You can even now do engineering architecture, which I think makes for a better candidate. One, because you're giving them a secondary kind of focus, which combines with the very left brain engineering thinking.
Yeah.
And you're giving them a more creative, more human, more palatable societal side, and combining it spatial. So architecture gives you a spatial dimension, which is really good. But law is really amazing, because if you could combine law with engineering, you basically, everything involves the law somewhere.
Yeah, of course.
So you're building stuff, and you understand all the rules around it, and how to get them done, and how to get them approved. And that's very useful. So contracts are all based in law, for instance.
And I mean, engineers are in the problem and solution game, right? So engineers are presented a problem, and they relish in those moments, because it's an engineer's role to solve it. And that's why they become great managers.
They do. That's undoubtedly true. And a high proportion of the most successful managers in the world, I think, without a doubt, would be engineers. They all come to me often after the course, and because I won't do this during the course for proper reasons, and they will come to me after the course and ask if I would mentor them. Sometimes I'll mentor them for many years after we teach them at university. And I find that, there's a thirst in young men for male figures in particular. But I've had females that have asked for mentoring. If someone decent and motivated and really wants to get ahead in life and improve themselves, who's not wasting my time, asks nicely, I will always say yes.
Wow. Is that taking up a lot of your time at the moment, mentoring? Are you still mentoring people?
Yeah, I do. I probably do at least 2 or 3 a year.
Wow.
Some years I've done 10, I think, but that gets a bit much. Because I've got to get the lecturing in. I've got a family. Yeah. Of course, I've got 3 children who are a little bit easier now. They're older. But and I have a wife who often complains that I'm never with her. So that's got to be sorted out. And but she's lovely.
That's ongoing.
Ongoing.
Am I crazy in saying that you have a diary that has everything in it, from the moment you wake up to the moment that you go to bed, that is strategically organized and where you spend your time? Or
yes, I like the hard diary, the one page per day. Because the electronics don't do that. The electronics can't give you. The electronics are one line on a tiny screen where you can't write next to each item.
Visual. Yours is very visual.
And my diary is generally organized with a 2-letter acronym at the front for each of the disciplines. So if I'm doing EG work, it'll have an EG designation. Also, if it's a meeting, it'll have asterisks before it and after it.
Sure.
So that if I ever want to look up, when did I have a meeting with Elliot in 2017, I'll just go straight. The electronics lose that information, whereas all these diaries are filed from 2000 to this year, all in my office. Yeah. So I can just pull it out and check, was it Wednesday the 17th or not? And I can find it.
And usually I would say, well, as if you actually have that all filed away, but I know...
it's farther away.
From looking behind.
It's farther away. Now, sometimes the more extraordinary thing is I will remember that moment.
Wow.
Say, I'm sure that happened, and I can even remember the exact words we exchanged. I will say, I remember you said this, and I remember I answered this. And I remember the way we resolved it was like this. And then you will begin to say, oh, yes, I now remember. But it was a more perfect memory when I was your age.
What have you done? I mean, my memory's horrible. What have you done to have a memory like that? Do you do some sort of brain training? Is there an exercise that you use to remember things like
I like it. I like it, so
intrigued.
I practice it. So if I'm sitting on the aeroplane to London and I have 14 hours to kill to Dubai, I'll pull out the list of English kings from William the Conqueror to Elizabeth II, and I'll see if I can recite them and remember all the 5 salient features about each monarch. I'll pull out a list of the Roman emperors from Augustus to Romulus Augustus in the Western Empire, and I'll just recite them. I mean, it's just something I enjoy doing. I also love reading the Macmillan Encyclopedia, which is an A to Z reference of everything semi-worthwhile or higher in the Western Hemisphere. It's all very Western-centric. It's just enjoyable for me, rather than read a novel or a whatever. Sometimes I feel like a novel for a change, and I might read some Arabic poetry, or I might read some Shakespeare, and Macbeth and King Lear are my 2 favorites. And I will just, I can still remember the quotes from those books which I did at school, which, as you can tell by the lines on my face, was more than a few years ago.
I don't know. I've got a lot of lines on my face. I just say because we're always laughing.
Good on
in my 30s. So.
Yeah, no, good on you. Stay 30. That's good.
Every bit of every scar or every crow's feet on the side of my eye just is a story. Is a story that I've told that I've laughed at myself. So.
Brilliant. That's a nice way to put it. No, I would say life is like a train that goes from Central to the Blue Mountains, and every train stop is different.
Yeah.
And every train stop requires a slightly different observation.
Wow.
And every train stop looks different looking at the other stops from that stop, forwards and backwards. And they're all different, they're all nice, and they're all worth having. And I don't know that I want to be 17 again or 27 again, but I loved every minute of those days. And some of them were not easy, but they were a train stop. That was Redfern or St. Peter's or Erskineville, or and by the way, when I used to sit at the train station, I used to rattle them off as well. And you know why? Because it's very simple, Elliot. It's actually not. It's no chore off anyone's. It's no skin off anyone's back. You're just sitting there anyway, as a school kid, waiting for the train to arrive. And you're going to Bexley North on the East Hills line, and you just rattle them off, right?
Start reading them.
See how many you can remember.
I love that.
It's no big deal, right?
So it's obviously been something that you've always been interested in, which is that
and probably God plays a part in that. He gives you some of that ability originally, and if you didn't have it, you probably wouldn't be interested in that. I would say you might be interested in something else, in which case, I mean, I'm not, to my knowledge, very musical. But for instance, if I could sit down and memorize music scores or play stuff on a violin or an oboe, which is what my children do so brilliantly, I would be probably really pleased with myself.
Me too. My mum was a singing teacher, and she always had a singing teacher. And I remember her singing teacher said that Jimmy seems to have like a really good inner ear. I think that he would be a really good singer. And I remember hearing my mum saying, I'll never forget it, she goes, Jimmy, no, he'll never be a singer. And that was the moment I realized that I wasn't as good at singing as I thought I was.
Well, everything also comes with practice, but there are some people who are genuinely natural. I mean,
I agree.
When I asked some of Australia's more notable musicians whom I've met, who do you think, they often say Nat King Cole was renowned to have the perfect pitch. And I would ask, what is that? What is the perfect pitch? And they would say something like, if I went up to the piano and played a note, he could sing that exact note at that exact pitch.
Yeah, wow.
So that, I would say that is probably partly God, or partly what you're born with, and partly what you've practiced. And if you look at somebody as amazing as Whitney Houston, and I'm saying this from someone who's not studied music or been good at it, she would have had a very good voice, I think, in her early songs. But if you listen to, say, the song she sang in The Bodyguard, I Will Always Love You, you would know that she's actually also progressed and traveled as a singer. She's also improved, because some of those notes are just incredible. And she couldn't do them earlier in her career. So, and that is true of all of us, I think. Our best gets better. I always tell my children, and when they used to tell me about their HSC, when they were studying for their HSC, they've all done that now. And I would say, don't ever tell me about your best, because your best is just your best right now.
Yeah, and it will continue to grow.
But your best is very good today, Jimmy. Jimmy, yes?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, Jimmy, your best is very good today on the microphone. But if you did this 1,000 times more, should your best remain the same? And the answer is no. Your best will get better. And you should keep setting the bar higher for yourself. And that's a very important part of every person's growth, including the exceptional people.
Have you seen Matthew McConaughey's Oscar speech?
No.
He does this speech. Yeah, no, he does this. It was either the Academy Awards or the Oscars, and he says that his inspiration. He goes on to talk about his inspiration. Is he meets up with this person, and this person says that this is what he should do, and this is what he could strive to, and it's actually him 10 years from now. And so he talks about that when he was, 15, he meets his 25-year-old self, and he's like, this is what you can do, and this is what you're going to accomplish, and this is how good you're going to be, and this is what you should strive towards. And then when he got to 25, his biggest inspiration was him at 35 and saying, if you keep your head down, this is what you're going to do. And it was something, and he's like, I'm never going to catch up to my mentor, and I'm never going to catch up to the person that I want to be, but I'm always going to strive for something better. And, having that something in front of you and striving for greatness, I think is important. I mean,
I've read a lot of those management books, and lots of them I find a bit nauseating. Because they're just sort of formulaic, and thou must this and thou must that and thou shalt this and thou shalt that. But what I tell people when I mentor them is, don't worry about writing a list on January 1 of 15 items. You know why? If you write 15 items, Jimmy, you won't do any of them.
Yeah.
It'll just be the tomorrow list that never comes.
Yeah.
You know what you should do, in my opinion, that worked for me? This is what worked for me, is I write one thing. Just one thing next year, but it's got to be one thing you've never done. So if you've never spoken French, if you're going to learn French by the end of next year, you got to do it. If you're going to learn 12 more Shakespearean quotes, if you're going to build one more building, get your building license, finish a PhD. You can't finish that in 1 year. Start a PhD, do something. But it's got to be something you've never done before. Right? Learn 150 new phrases in French. It's got to be something you want to do that you've never done before. Not something you've done, got to be something new. Just concentrate on one thing and you'll find you'll do it. And on December 31, the Jimmy at December 31 will be a slightly better Jimmy than on January 1. And you'll find on the way you would have picked up 2 other things on average. That's what I found. And you will have done 3 new things that year. And you'll be quite a bit a better person by the end of that year than in the beginning.
I love that you said that. I love that you said, try something new. I think, and this is a very general statement, but something that a lot of people can get caught up now, it's kind of like the in thing to say is, I don't want to do that. That gives me anxiety. And I don't want to do that because the thought of that is just going to make me have an anxiety attack. I think there is a big difference between something giving you anxiety and something out of your comfort zone that makes you nervous.
Yes.
Doing a podcast. I had a live interview on Ticker TV this morning, and doing a live cross on a morning show, and doing all these things.
Yeah.
make you nervous. But you know what happened after the first time I did it, or the first time I did a podcast? Of course, I was extremely nervous.
Yeah.
But then the next time I was able to go, okay, the world, the roof didn't fall in and the world didn't collapse. And as nervous as I was able to work on that and improve. And I think that's a big thing, trying something new. And
and I always tell people that I mentor, don't worry about other people, right? Don't worry about other people, because that's an endless comparison that never goes anywhere. You've made $1 billion. What about 2 billion? Someone's got 3 billion. Gates has got 100. Someone's got 110. Where does that end? It never ends. You got 1 Rolls Royce. What about 2 Rolls Royces? What about 3? That's a ridiculous comparison with other people. The only comparison that makes sense to me is a comparison with yourself.
Sure.
Are you a better person next year? If you look back on last year, have you grown since last year? Are you more educated? Have you learnt more? Have you done more? Have you developed a new skill? Have you done a new thing? Have you acquired a new license? You did your first international podcast. You did your first multilingual podcast. You did your first podcast that was transmitted to Hollywood. They're all new things. They're all bars for you to say, the Jimmy of yesterday is not as good as the Jimmy of today, therefore this is good.
I love
it's
that.
Not about your best friend, and it's not about your other friend, and it's not about what they've done. That comparison never finishes, right? Because there'll always be someone who's done more than you in something. You know, even when Carl Lewis broke the record and got those 4 gold medals in the LA Olympics, right? There is someone who came after him who broke the 100 meters record and ran it faster than him, right? And then came Usain Bolt, and then his number didn't look that good, even though it was considered amazing that he cracked 10 seconds, right? I think it was 9.84 that year. But now we're at 9.58.
Just Googling it now, under 10
which
seconds.
Is a different number. But the amazing thing always is no one, since Jesse Owens had won 4 gold medals at the one Olympics in track and field, and there it was done again. You know, that is the comparison. And Carl Lewis is a much faster runner than I'll ever be. And so it's not about that comparison. It's about, is Shane of last year slightly worse than Shane of this year? And if Shane of this year is a better Shane, then definitely that's the journey. That's progression. The journey.
Oh, that is very inspirational. I love that.
And I always tell my children and the people I mentor, the bar that you set yourself, Jimmy, is the bar you will jump. So you set it at 4 inches above the ground and jump over it and clap for yourself. That's one thing. But why don't you try closer to your limit? Why don't you take that bar to the last highest jump that you've ever done and see if you can jump that first? And if you can, what about 2 mil more? What about 3? What about 5? And just see, you may fail, you may succeed, but you won't know where your limits are until you've gone to your limits. And that's true in all your skill sets. And, you know, you may never have played tennis before, but if this is what you want to do, why don't you try that as one new thing for next year? And just say, next year, I'm not going to be, you know, Pat Cash. I'm not going to be Pat Rafter, but I'm going to be, you know, good at it. I'm going to be able to give somebody a nice game on the court.
You know what can really hurt you, though, I find, and it's what I tell all my staff, is ego. And I think ego can be your biggest enemy sometimes. Ego is going to stop you from being vulnerable to make a mistake. Ego is going to stop you from telling people what your audacious goal is. Ego is going to stop you from going, I have made multiple mistakes and I'm going to continue to make multiple mistakes, but I want to learn. And I think...
Yeah, but you know what, Jimmy? If something is really painful to do, my advice to you is don't do it. Go and pick something else. I mean, if you're finding Hungarian so difficult, in 6 months you've learned 4 words, why don't you try another language? I mean, clearly Hungarian's not for you, and there are 1,700 other languages to pick from. So if you can't play tennis, it doesn't make you a lesser person.
Well, like I said,
ice skating, or you can do something else.
like I said to you about the whole singing thing, that's what my mum said. My dad would slap me on the shoulder and be like, just stick to your strengths, Jimmy.
But I'll tell you something interesting as well about the theorem of perseverance. I'm a natural public speaker. I did debating at school. I debated at university. It's something I like. And I joined Toastmasters when I was 20. It's an international public speaking group.
Great group.
Unbelievable. Really developed. I won my first 6 club championships in different categories. There are different categories of speech. There's humorous speech. There's international speech. There's evaluation, which is a type of speaking. There's and so on. And every one of those took me from the club level to the area level, which is the next area level up. And I lost. I came second in the first contest, second contest, third contest, fourth contest, fifth contest, and sixth contest. And by the sixth contest, I was ready to give up. Because this is only the first level after club, right?
Yeah.
And I just thought, maybe I'm not that good at public speaking. Maybe I love it, but it's not for me. And maybe I need to give up, and maybe I should forget about this. I've spent long enough. I've been here a year and a half. This is not really working out. I'm always the bridesmaid, never the bride. And it's the second lowest level, so it'll never work. And let me give you what happened. I just persevered that little bit longer and prepared that little bit harder. And then I had 43 firsts in a row.
What? 43 in a row.
Right. After 6 fails. Now, and here's the thing. Just when you're feeling like giving up, my advice is, why don't you try just a little bit longer and see what happens?
I love that.
Often, that is the period of greatest success, because your experience from the 6 failures, which you haven't factored in, has now come to give you your strength and your experience required for victory in your 7th.
What was your best win out of the 44?
Well, I've
was
won
it your
the
first?
So 43 firsts at club, and I then did 28 firsts at the next level up. Then I did 18 firsts at state. I never lost a contest at state level, and I did 4 Australian titles.
Wow.
So from 6th, imagine none of that would have happened if I was about to give up, which I nearly did after my first 6 seconds. I mean, they weren't fails, but to me they were fails.
Yeah.
And coming second in the Grand Prix it might as well come last, you know. And I didn't like it, and I wanted to be first, and I couldn't. And I tried once, twice in different categories, and every time came second for 6 times.
Wow.
And so there was a moment there of absolute doubt.
Yeah.
And my advice would be, if you can just push yourself that little bit longer, just to see what happens, sometimes you will get your 43 wins in a row.
So I guess it's the whole thing about ego, not having an ego to give up and not letting pride get in the way. But more importantly, which is what you're saying, do something that you enjoy, do something that you like, and don't give up. You know, the bulldog doesn't let go of the ball or a stick because it loves a stick. It's very hard getting it off him. Lock your jaws and sink your teeth into something and don't let go.
And that's the reality of our lives. Our lives are all complex, and they're becoming more complex by the day. We all have many, many distractions. But at the end of the day, a lot of the distractions actually have no meaningful vocational or educational end. So if you sit and play a computer game for 4 hours a day, at the end of it, only the owner of that game is achieving something. They're getting real data, they're also making money, but you're not gaining anything. You might be relaxing for half an hour or an hour, and if that's between strength sessions where you're achieving something, that's great. But if it's not, you're kind of wasting your life.
Yeah.
So you need to think, what is it that I love? Is it mountain climbing? Is it learning French? Is it rezoning property? Is it buying land and subdividing it and making money? Is it riding a bulldozer? There's lots and lots of things you can love and be good at. And why don't you go and make them part of your life?
Yes, I agree.
That's my advice. That I think works. And what I did with my children, this is perhaps there is no book for raising children, but what I did with my children, rather than sit and do the things they liked, what I did is I tried talking all of them into the things I liked. So if I liked throwing the football around and playing touch footy in the park, I got them to come and do that. If I liked public speaking, I took them with me. If I liked, going to the gym and running on the treadmill, I took them to the gym and put them on the treadmill next to me. If I liked, nature walks in the Blue Mountains, I took them with me. So we did all the things I liked. My son, I made him come and run the first City to Surf with me. I've done 19 City to Surfs.
Wow.
I mean, you look fit.
I've done 2 or 3, and I've entered into an Ironman and then done my knee. And
you look fit.
But I did the marathon under 3 hours actually. So
wow,
I was stoked with that. So.
Yeah, I told you looked fit.
Yeah, I'll stop it, Dr. Shane.
Pretty good.
I'm going to get an ego. I'm going to get a big ego.
Ego's good sometimes. But I did 19 City to Surfs until this year, and I couldn't do my 20th yet, and looks like we won't do it this year. And I'm not going to do this Mickey Mouse thing they're suggesting. I'll wait till next year and we'll do it properly. But I took my son, who was 7. I took him to Vaucluse and I trained him up and down Heartbreak Hill. And we started with 1K and up and down. And then we did 2 and then we did 3. And every week afterwards, we'd go to Double Bay and have a breakfast together as a reward for him running up and down the hill.
Yeah.
And so it became like a thing to do with Dad. Oh, Dad, when are we going to Heartbreak Hill this morning? So we did that for 11 weeks in training, and then he was ready, and he ran his first City to Surf when he was 8. And
at 8?
Yes, he's now 20 and he's done 12 of them.
Hasn't stopped.
No, he loves it. So, and what he did is he developed a love for fitness and for running and for doing things, and particularly for running up hills, which is what the City to Surf is about, as you know. So here's my reality: is rather than kind of go and do things I really disliked that made me grumpy to make a child happy, I basically talked the child into doing things that I already liked that made me happy. And therefore, it was never a chore to go and spend 3 hours of my Sunday morning training him.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of fun. Yeah.
It's very, very clever. It's very clever. I'm about to have my first son in 3 weeks. First child, actually, and he's going to be a boy. And I will thank you.
My theory on populating Australia, so you're doing a great job.
Thank you. I can't take all the credit. It was a teamwork. I will be doing all that I can to get him involved in surfing and public speaking.
Stuff you love.
Stuff that I love, you like. Selfishly, obviously. I mean, I'd love him to be good at golf because there's a lot of money in golf. But anyway,
whatever. And if you like spending 4.5 hours on the golf course, take him. He'll love it.
I can't. I'm doing it purely from a financial standpoint of view. I can't stand golf. I'm horrible at it. I don't have the patience for it, but it's a lot of money, and I hope he's really
it's a lot of money. I hope he's good at it too, for your sake. So that was my philosophy, and I think, and I would take the kids to Centennial Park, and because we live near all of that stuff, and otherwise it'd be somewhere else, and we'd go on the grass and we'd run with my little daughter Katya when she's 3, and Mark would have been 5 and Isabella would have been 8, and they'd all run around, do a lap of Centennial together with me, and then we'd go to the restaurant afterwards and have a juice and a coffee for me and a chocolate for them, and just make it a kind of a day out with the kids.
A reward, yes.
Yeah, and it's not sitting glued to a TV screen or. But if you love a particular cartoon, for instance, I'm very fond of Tintin.
I love Tintin. Have you seen the new one that's out, the recent one?
No, but I'd love to. I must go. And I bought all the books, and I sit with them and read the books at night and talk about the cleverness of Ergay in developing the script, because the script is extremely powerful. Very clever script. Yeah, so that's what I did. I just found all the things that I found enjoyable, and then they weren't a chore. I'd just sit down and do them with the children. Maybe that's something you can do.
And then you're like, come on, kids, let's do this. And they're like, Dad, we're sick of spending time with you. Come on, give us a
Well,
break.
that happens when they're about 14.
All right,
There's
I got
no
14
more dad.
years.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's now I have my own personality. Yeah. So, and then when they get to about 18 or 19, they kind of, it's embarrassing for dad to be with them.
Yeah.
Because they have to be with their friends. But
Yeah.
there's now a different relationship. Again, it's like the train stops on the train. So it's very fun. You don't have to change nappies and worry about them touching fire and worry about them cutting them. So, you know, like you're out of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Now you worry about them, you know, hitting another car because they're on their P's, you know. You just worry about different things.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Well, I've got 14 years to wait until I have to go through that, so I'm okay.
No, you will hopefully propagate the species further and give your lovely son siblings to play.
Yes, no, I will. No, 100%. 100%.
As an only child, that's not going to be good. Unless
no. We're going to get through the first, and then we're definitely going to have 2 or 3.
Well, one for Australia. If you read my LinkedIn notes, you'll see that it's very important for Australia to be more populated for its growth. And essentially, it's a tax-based issue. So because our 20 to 60 age group is essentially the only demographic that produces tax revenue, which is required to run the nation, that's emptying out because we had the 3 and 4 children per family in the 50s and 60s. And now we only have 1s and 2s and 0s. So what's happening is that's emptying out that demographic. And therefore, we've actually got a problem we will certainly have one in 30 years' time, which is structural. And that is we simply will not have enough people producing tax revenue to run the nation.
Is immigration a way to combat that? Or?
That's the best way. That's the easiest way. You simply import people that are in that demographic or slightly below that demographic and put them into the system. So that's the easiest way to do it. And often migrants bring with them a different culture for having children as well. So they often have a greater propensity to produce 3 and 4 children than we do.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you give us a child when he's 12, he'll become or she'll become fully Australian and integrated by the time they're an adult. They would have gone through our uni system. They usually do really well because they try. They're all very determined little people, and I should know I was one of them once. But that's and there's many good reasons why we won't have 3, 4, and 5 children in the modern family each. There are many good reasons. I wish it were otherwise because we could then populate using our own natural growth, but that just simply will not happen. It's a predicament of all of the Western countries, not just us. But I think immigration is a very, very simple solution. And I'm not even talking about who you bring. I'm just saying as long as they age somewhere between 14 and 30, that's perfect.
Yeah. And then that fixes the problem.
Fixes the problem.
Yeah, I love that. Dr. Shane, I want to ask you something about something that I'm interested in as of late. And I may be stabbing in the dark here, but, with your background with zoning and architecture and structural buildings, have you ever had an interest, putting this out there, have you ever had an interest in old architectural, ancient Egyptian structures like the pyramids and how they came about? And I've been doing a lot of research lately and listening to a lot of podcasts. Maybe I shouldn't have gone down too many rabbit holes.
No, you should.
About all these ancient architectural pyramids and structures, not just in Egypt, but all around the world that were built. Do you have an interest in that also?
I do. I'm fascinated by lots of that because lots of that stuff, it creates a very different fabric to cities. I've been to 350 cities around the world.
Wow.
They're all different. They're all built differently. They've all progressed differently. They've all evolved differently. They all have different issues. But what's interesting about it is they all have one common theme. They're populated by one species called the human. And that species, no matter how different it looks, it actually is essentially the same all around the world. So when people say, the communists, the Russians, the Cubans, the blah, the capitalists, the the Mohicans, the whatever. They're actually divisions that are enforced rather than real. The actual reality is, if you take 1/4 millimeter of skin off you and I, we are virtually unrecognizable.
Wow.
So the only thing that distinguishes my external appearance from yours is basically 1/4 millimeter of skin covering.
Wow.
The rest of it is almost identical. Your kidneys function exactly the same way as mine. You breathe in the oxygen the same way as I do. You breathe in the same percentage of oxygen to nitrogen concentrations in the air as I do. Your eye's optics, when it formulates a vision of an object, is exactly the same as mine. So when you think of the commonality between you and I, and what aspirations we had and what drivers, they're identical. For 99.9% of the time. And so it is in history. The races may have changed. The dialogue may have changed. The factors may have changed. The circumstances will change. But actually the incentives for humans to do what they do, their drivers, their ability to live together in cities and to progress in society is almost identical. And to see the success and failure of all of these through structure is also fascinating. And if you look at some of the ancient cities like Baghdad or say Cairo, that goes back to the 10th century, but Baghdad will go back to pre-biblical times. Cities like Damascus, that is the oldest inhabited city in the world, that's 1,200 years old. Cities like Tokyo that go back 1,000 years. And you compare them to the modern cities like Sydney that are 200 years old. And modern cities like Los Angeles that were built in the recent past. They're all very interesting to observe because they're essentially about the needs of the human. That's all they are. Now, the pyramids are fascinating for a different reason. The pyramids are fascinating because, like so many of the amazing structures of the ancient world, they were built for a purpose.
Yes.
And that purpose was to bury a king. That's all
Wow.
they're for. They are to say how amazing Khufu, Khafra, and Muqarra. They're the three names of Cheops and the other two.
I nailed it. I knew you would know that. This is great.
Well, and they're a long time before Christ. The marvel of building them took something like 30,000 slaves each.
Wow.
But the slaves did not build the pyramids. What built the pyramids is the engineering knowledge of the people that worked and were paid for by the king. So you can't force unpaid people to do that work. The unpaid people simply do the hard work, the labor, what they're told. But the brains of it is how you actually put 1.5 or 2 ton stones across, is it 153 meter base in a square and get the last stone to close. That is phenomenal. And building an internal structure where the burial chambers are for the king and queen, in that intricacy where they're difficult to get to. And these monuments were essentially edifying the egos or perhaps the beliefs of figures of power. Now, you may go to the Schönbrunn Palace on a different level, or the Élysée Palace in France. But the Schönbrunn Palace I saw recently that the Habsburgs built in Vienna. It is incredible marvel of architecture and opulence, but without concentrated power in one individual or a group of individuals, that large sort of project cannot actually happen. So whilst we might hate despots, and we might think that their work is completely to be dismantled and abhorred, and some of that is most certainly real. None of these things would have happened without one despot needing something to be done for a reason. In the case of King Khufu, the biggest pyramid owner, he needed to be buried so that in the afterlife he would have this incredible resurrection. And he buried incredible amounts of live and dead objects with him. And that could not have happened if he was not the king of a very powerful ancient kingdom.
Yeah, of course.
He would have had no burial at all. He would have been chucked in the ground.
Real dictator.
Right. But the fabric of the city and you look at the fabric of a city like Cairo, and I've been to Cairo. You look at the fabric of a city like Cairo, which has been wrecked by earthquakes several times as well. But it had the incredible rule of the ancient races, and then it had a very, very long and rich history of Arab rule, and then it had the Mamluks, who were an offspring of the Arabs, and each of them brought their own needs for architecture, for religious belief. And again, it comes back to the interaction between material and man, at the basic need of a human wanting to do something for society that edified themselves or their race. So that's how cities are constructed.
Is that what you're using in your zoning and planning these days?
It's a bit simpler today. Yeah. I don't have those powers.
Yeah. How can I get livestock and things to be buried in, the cities? No, you can't.
I'd like to. I think today we govern ourselves via a very different set of rules. We take a lot of public opinion into consideration. Some of it's extremely helpful and some of it's incredibly unhelpful. And by that I mean you should not mistake opinion for truth.
Yeah.
And often you will get 300 people to give you a view on this incredibly beautiful architectured building, and all you will end up doing is butchering the architecture to accommodate the views of so many disparate opinions.
The mass,
But if you can manage the public opinion where you are setting your new architecture and your new land use change and sell it to them for its benefits, and have them come along the journey, and take their views to the extent that they're useful into account and incorporate them into your scheme, you generally end up with a fairly harmonious journey to deliver your hopefully close to optimal result.
Right.
I'm personally impressed with very big things. Like, I don't like little things. That's just me. My view is tall buildings are very impressive, little buildings are not. The pyramid, if it was 1 stone tall, is completely unimpressive. But you rack all those stones up like that, that's pretty impressive, right? The Eiffel Tower, if it was as tall as your desk, is nothing.
Yeah.
But being the tallest structure in the world in 1889, maybe, a number like that, is impressive. The Empire State Building is very impressive because of what it is. Sears Towers is impressive. So essentially, height and size create a sense of... I mean, Manhattan is impressive to you when you walk there because of the sheer number of impressive tall buildings.
Breathtaking buildings, yeah.
That is not to say that there aren't a huge number of beautiful...
Crazy cab drivers, yeah.
Yeah, that's true too of New York. I remember the last time I was there, he insisted I give him a tip. And I'm thinking, how's this work?
Yeah.
And he said, I got you to the airport in less time than otherwise. And I'm thinking, compared to what?
To what's otherwise? And that's your job.
Fear of this guy choking me before I take my flight. I said, how much are you thinking? He said, well, you decide. I said, no, I think you better decide. It was like a $60 fare. And he said, give me $30. And I said, 50% of the fare? And he said, well, I think that's the minimum you should give me. And I said, all right, well, why don't we give you the minimum? I thought, I better get out before he kills me. By the way, for anyone listening to this podcast, please don't do this. Argue with the driver. But I was fearful and in a hurry, so I just got out for $30.
No, sometimes you got it. I love that. No, and I agree. That's and you've now done over $12 billion in rezoning.
More than that, probably close to 23 by the end of this year.
$23 billion
of historical land value rezonings. So across 281 projects in total. And that's historical value. If you look in today's value, meaning the stuff we've rezoned 20 years ago, what it's worth today, that value would be close to 200 billion.
Wow.
So you would say, I know a little bit about zoning.
Yeah, I would say.
Probably. Yeah.
200 billion. Do you remember what's been your favorite thing to rezone? What's been one of your most memorable moments to sort of rezone?
Oh yeah, they're all
That a loaded
lots
question?
of beautiful moments. You could write a book about the moments.
Yeah, you
I
should.
still remember when I rezoned Wonderland, for instance. It was a theme park and becoming obsolete and became dangerous for people to ride. And the people who owned it had basically wanted to sell it. They sold it on to what was then ING Real Estate, who were our client, and asked us to do the rezoning for them. And here was this theme park that had given everyone so much joy for 18 years. And I didn't want to be the guy that banned Father Christmas or...
Yeah. Had
So,
to bring everybody's dreams.
yeah, but actually the theme park was
memories
then
to
by
us.
then closed and so on. And I remember there was a big roller coaster. This is probably too old for you to remember, but it was called the Bush Beast.
Okay.
It was a big wooden roller coaster. And one of the councillors at Blacktown Council, when we were doing the rezoning, had this great idea that it was a heritage item. So I thought this is going to be very problematic because it would ruin the 12 months of design that I'd spent designing this whole estate. And it was turning into a 9,000 person employment hub, industrial estate, totally functional.
Wow, great.
In exactly the place everyone wanted it, big transport links around it, and so on. A great success story at the end. And I rang this guy to chat to him, and as you could in those days and still can. And he was adamant that I was completely bonkers or that I didn't understand how this worked. And so I said, look, let's do a heritage report. I found a bloke who actually had a specialty, you wouldn't believe this, in roller coaster heritage items. So there was one in Australia, and I had to wait for him to come back from the US. And I grabbed him and I took him there and he did the report. And he concluded that it was virtually of no value. It was built in 1989, so it's actually much younger than me. So I could be more heritage than the roller coaster. I did a structural report which found 271, I still remember the number, structural faults in the machine, 271 structural faults, which meant it should not actually be used at all. And its repair was going to be tens of millions of dollars. You might as well dismantle it and start anew and get the industrial park and the employment going. And I still remember standing up before that council and arguing with this one councillor about why the Bush Beast should not be a heritage item. And he still voted no. We ended up 11-1. There were 12 councillors. We ended up 11-1. But I knew that I could not get him over the line, no matter what I was going to say. And I quoted the structural report and the heritage expert, and I quoted the fact that I was born in 1968 and therefore much older than the roller coaster, and that it had no intrinsic value. But he wanted to be dissuaded.
Yeah, his pride got in the way. It doesn't matter about the facts, you know.
I still remember a hilarious moment when I was rezoning Little Bay for the University of New South Wales, which was at the time our client and still is a great friend of this office. This was a 170,000 square metre site and 17 hectares right on the water at Little Bay, which is right next to Long Bay Jail. And it was obsolete. The university had no need for it. And we're thinking of what to do. I was doing all the ecological studies to see what was there. And the university had, in the 1970s, dug 2 huge bits of the site up and sold the sand just because it gave them value. But what happened is, as the holes stayed there, God filled them up with water. And they became, according to at least one expert in the department, 2 natural water bodies that would harbour new fauna and flora in the area. And one of the big items was the migrating egret. Now, this was quite hilarious because the migrating, I don't know if you've ever seen one of these things, but she's quite a beautiful looking bird. And I'm talking about a feathered bird.
I didn't even know we're talking about birds.
Yes, the migrating egret. Now, she lives in the subantarctic regions, I came to read in the many reports I commissioned. And she finds it too cold there, so in the warmer months, she comes over to lay her eggs with her girlfriends. And there is a leader, and they fly in a triangular formation. They fly for a week and a half.
Wow.
And they come. Yeah, and they come and lay their eggs and have their hatchlings and then go back. So I was reading all of this, and I'm kind of arguing against the inclusion of these water bodies because I want, obviously, not to lose a lot of land for the rezoning process to work better and to master plan better. And I'm just sitting there, and I remember someone saying, what about the migrating egret? And I said, let me understand this. Now, I've only got 3 degrees from university, so I might be stupid, but let me understand the logic that I'm being asked to understand and accept. We've got these lovely little, the medium-sized birds. They live in the subantarctic regions. They fly for 1.5 weeks in the cold air, right? Now, this is what they do. They get to Wilson's Promontory, the southernmost point of Australia. They look at it. It's open. There's nobody there. It's filled with beautiful things. And they say no. Then they travel up the Victorian coastline. Most of it's completely empty, completely no people, got beautiful landscapes, water, lakes. They say, no, 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 not for us. They go down the southern coast of New South Wales, which is filled with lagoons and lakes, empty land, empty, no people, no nothing. And they say, no, 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 not for us. And then they keep flying further north. Eventually they get to Little Bay, and they will see 2 man-made lakes too, filled with water, right, in the last 30 years. And they will say, oh my God, this is where we shall lay our eggs. After passing all of that stuff, is that the logic I'm being asked to accept? And they're going, okay, well, maybe it's, yeah, maybe you're right, Dr. Shane, maybe you're right.
Isn't it funny that in your line of work, in zoning, they're the arguments you have to have about a migrating bird?
The migrating egret. She came to nearly stop my rezoning.
The migrating egret just stops you in your tracks and going, how am I researching about a migrating bird? What has my life come to? And you're out there cursing the birds, going, why are you making my job so difficult?
That's exactly right. And not only that, we made the bird sounds. I had the expert there making the bird sounds at night and during the day. We never saw one. So the argument of the Department of Natural Resources at the time was that, but they could come. I said, but we can't keep saying they could come. Now, they haven't come in the 2 years I've been here. We've done everything to entice them to come. They don't come. Now, I pretty much can understand why they haven't come. There's so many other places in the 810 kilometers,
Let me show you the brochure of where they're spending summer.
Which is all empty and available. Why would they come here? So anyway, and somehow that still wasn't compelling enough, but we eventually won that argument.
Is there an ulterior motive there? Is there somebody using the migrating bird to not get something rezoned? Is that generally what it is? Is there something else going on there? Or?
Kind of. I think what tends to happen is a lot of these people often have an objective. They're zealots on a particular topic. And you tend to collect the person that's going to go and work for that department generally is someone who loves that plant or that animal, right? For instance, I had an argument about koalas. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I also love the egret, and I love our national symbol, the koala, right?
Yeah.
I was doing a rezoning at 7 Mile Beach, and there was something like, there's a special type of gum tree, and our beloved koala sits on the one tree all of its life, doesn't move, and eats the one gum leaf all of its life.
The eucalyptus, yep.
Yes, but it's unbelievable that from that one source, which is a very poor source of diversified nutrients, it develops hair and eyes and internal organs, and that's why it needs to eat so much and sleep so often, because it's actually a very slow process.
Yeah.
And but we had, I think, 40 or 50 koalas on these trees. That the trees are also listed as an endangered ecological community because they're part of an ecosystem which the koala needs. And then the koala in New South Wales has its own state policy. Now, there are no state policy for my children or yours, but there is one for the koalas. And it's called SEP 44. Remember that, SEP 44.
SEP 44.
The koala SEP. There's no children's SEP, but there's a SEP for the koalas. So, and so it's powerful legislation. It protects them. And the argument was, you can't touch all of this. And I really needed that part of the site, a small part of that land, to be able to enact the great master plan vision that I had for the site. Now, I had the same tree on the other side of the site with no koalas on it. So my argument to the ecologist was, if we're able to get the right expert, the right animal handlers, animal experts, fauna experts, to come and move their royal highnesses from that trees and put them on the same tree, same type of tree on the other side, is that something we could do? Yes, but we don't know if they will like it there. I said, but if they don't have a house number, I mean, it doesn't say I live at 18, Bexley Road, Bexley. They're just grabbing leaves off that tree. Can't they eat off that tree if it's the same tree? Oh, we're not sure. It's very complicated. I said, why is it complicated? No one could tell them. I said, why don't we try moving a few for now? Well, we've still got time to finish the rezoning and see if they go well. We'll monitor them. If they go well, you leave them there. Because I thought they could actually be attractions for the people buying the blocks.
Yeah, of course.
Because imagine if you could tell people that came to visit you, Jimmy, say, by the way, you want to see the koalas at the other end of the property.
I'll tell you a very funny story after this, but yes. Yeah.
And there you go. And that's how we resolved it. And at the end, they were totally movable and they were okay and they loved it. And none of them passed away, thankfully. And we looked after them. And by the way, I got the ecologists to check them for health whilst we were at it. And we found a couple of them had problems. And we fixed those for them before we put them back. So it actually improved the health of the koalas that I was moving them. Yeah.
I was just going to say, just never trust anybody from Japan that tells you any koala facts. And this is purely because of me. In Western Australia, growing up, my mum and dad used to run a wildlife park since I was 7 or 8. And mum and dad used to say that if you want to eat at the Koala Cafe is what it was called. And we had 25 koalas at the wildlife park. And they said, if you wanted to eat at the Koala Cafe and, you want to get paid pocket money, you have to do something at the wildlife park. Well, I wanted to do something that didn't involve getting my hands dirty, which was the Koala Tours, which means that from 9 till 11 and then from 2 till 3 and then from 5 till 6, I would do all of the Koala Tours. Now, our main customer was tour buses of beautiful people from Japan, and they came with translators. And before we did all the tours, so when I first started the job, I had to go. They love
koalas, don't they?
Yeah, they love koalas, but I had to go to all the training sessions. Now, the person running the training sessions and giving me all the information to do the tours was really an employee of my mum and dad, so they couldn't really tell me what to do. So, of course, I didn't go to any of the koala training. So let's just say that all of the koala tours from the years of 2001 to 2006, all the information that the big groups of Japanese tourists that came through were completely incorrect. So much so that I would say, koalas, generally sleep about 15 hours a day, maybe 12 hours a day, and their main source of nutrition is spaghetti bolognese. Yeah. And people would go, spaghetti bolognese, isn't it eucalyptus? And I'm like, no, these guys eat spaghetti bolognese. Anyway, who wants to hold a koala?
I'm sure you knew enough. You'd held it long enough.
I knew enough. I knew that my trump card would always be like, all right, who wants to hold a koala? So, Dr. Shane, I just want to ask, I just want to say, you've done so much of it, like you said, $200 billion worth of rezoning. In today's dollars, you've got over 120 staff, if not more. You lecture people, you mentor people. I want to take away for everybody listening, what's a good starting point? Where, in whatever, career or whatever they're studying, whatever. What's a good starting point?
I always tell people, don't worry where you start, just worry where you finish, right?
Right.
And I would say the best start is a start you can afford. So go to the maximum you can afford and go there and do it. And if it's something you can know a little bit about and you are happy with, you like, Start with stuff you like. If you like the house next door to where you're living, go and save up the deposit and buy it. And better to buy real estate than, I love property. Property is my passion. It's, I think, the world's most powerful asset class.
Mm.
You go and do that. And believe it or not, it will look after you over time. It is the world's most incredible asset class. And if you pick well, and here are the basic rules to what you should pick. If you're starting small, I would say worst house, best street.
Mm-hmm.
So in real estate, you're not buying the house, you're buying the neighbors. That's what you're buying.
Beautiful.
Over time, that's what will make you the money. Buy the neighbors. So your instinct when you're buying an asset is to actually look for a nice one that you like. Yes. But go against your instinct. The right instinct is to find the worst house in that street and buy it for the cheapest price you can. It will look expensive because it'll be almost unlivable. But what you're actually doing is buying land value only. Because the land is what appreciates over time and the house is what depreciates over time. Mm-hmm. So you're actually paying zero for the built asset and the maximum amount or the minimum amount that you should pay for the landed asset. So that's rule number one. Secondly is try and buy something, if you can, that has attributes for functionality. So if you can be close to a rail station, if you can be close to a shopping center, if you can be close to things that a great school, PLC, Sydney Grammar, whatever, they will all have additional attributes for value going forward. Mm-hmm. That's two. Three is if you can buy things that distinguish your property from something else. If you can have a water view, if you have a river access, if you can have the only tree with a koala on it in the street. So don't think it's always a negative. It can be an asset. Yes. If you can have a pharaoh's mummy found on your land, don't throw it out. That's a great feature.
Find something
you
unique.
You won't get one, but you may get an Aboriginal thing. But
migrating bird, though. No to the migrating bird.
No migrating egrets. They're bad for value. No, they're probably all right for a house. They're not so easy if you're rezoning. But
yes.
But remember, make it an area where you aspire to go. And there is something I wrote about in my PhD. It's called substitutable suburb theory. So here's the next rule of real estate. By the way, these are general rules, and with general rules, they will always have exceptions. Yeah. So please don't ring me and say I found an exception in the nullable plane in laneway. Got ya. No, I'm not responsible for what you buy, right? But I'm just giving you some rules that, in general, in an ordinary situation, all else being equal, will work almost all the time.
Logic
will work almost all the time, right? Correct. So the next thing is, if you love Paddington, say, and Paddington's expensive, but the next suburb to Paddington is Marrickville, and it's cheap. Or generally it'll be 30% cheaper because it's still disheveled or whatever. Buy the substitutable suburb. It's much better value for you initially. You have less money, less capital outlay. Your chances of upside are higher. It'll take a bit longer, but buying in a suburb like Point Piper that's already fully established, you're already paying the full price.
You're paying.
Yes, that will appreciate over time and so on. But actually, if you wanted the biggest jump, you should buy in a substitutable suburb. Mm-hmm. And the substitutable suburb is, for instance, you will go and buy a house in Bowral or a block of land in Bowral of 2,000 metres. It'll cost you $1 million. Mm-hmm. You can go 5 minutes down the road to Mossvale, which isn't Bowral, and you can buy a 2,000 square metre block for $500,000. Now, that is a $500,000 discount for essentially the same location. That's substitutable suburb theory. That's where you should buy today. Because over time, the price of this one will go up a lot more than the price of this one. It won't ever be as high, but it will be close one day.
Yep, and you're going to see more value because you're getting it a
lot more upside. A lot more upside. And by the way, one of the biggest things about real estate is see if you can find a level of debt and affordability you can manage without affecting your lifestyle, and just hang on for the cycle to finish and to start another cycle. If you can go 2 or 3 cycles, real estate cycles, ups and downs.
The property cycle.
Without any detriment to your lifestyle. I mean, if you have to sell your suit to maintain the mortgage, that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
So don't do that. But I'm saying it's an absolute fact, certainly in growing city. The premise of all of this is population growth. If your city is declining, you will not see asset price appreciation.
Supply and demand.
You will see asset price depreciation, like Japan's been seeing as its cities empty out.
Yeah.
And Japan's had no immigration and zero immigration and zero population growth for the last 30 years. And it literally is in a full 20-year cycle of asset price deflation.
Wow.
And we don't have that in Australia anywhere, but you do have it in some of the towns. So if you look at the demographics of some of the towns, and you see that the town is losing people, it's gone from 900 people to 700 to 500, that is a town you should never buy anything in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why? It will never, ever appreciate in value. Whereas if you look at Sydney, it's 5 million people. Sydney will be 10 million people in 25 years' time. It's the best city in the world to live in. It ranks one in virtually every survey for lifestyle or livability or world ascendancy or whatever measures they use. And the only times we come second or third to anyone, like Oslo, God knows how, is usually on affordability, because we're not particularly affordable.
Yeah.
But in terms of beauty, natural beauty, accessibility, lifestyle, cleanliness, level of crime, livability, and where would you find a harbour like that? I've been to San Francisco Harbour, to Vancouver Harbour. I've been to the Thames. I've seen just about every nice. I haven't been to Rio. I've seen every nice harbour in the world, just about. And mate, there is no way. I often feel when people tell me, "What do you think of this harbour?" You know, when they show me their harbour, I feel like quoting the line from Paul Hogan. That's not a knife.
Yeah. This is a knife. Yeah.
That's not a harbour. You want to see a harbour? Let me show you some pictures.
Or you say, I hope they didn't have any immigrating birds, because they would have some big old zoning issues on that.
Well, we love this city. It's clearly world class on so many levels, and we should learn to grow it so it becomes a world city. It's on the verge of being a world city. I'd say it's almost there, but 5 million people is not quite enough to be a world city. You should have 10 million people if you're a world city. And let me say this to you, if Melbourne was 8 million or 9 million and Sydney was 10, you could create the business case for a very fast train almost overnight, which you cannot do with 5 million and 4 million. You cannot do it.
You're correct.
You simply do not have $100 billion to throw around. That's what it would cost to do the 810 kilometre journey. But if you had more people, then you could do that, and you'd create more connectivity, better infrastructure, and so on.
I would love to have you back on this podcast very soon, because I feel like we could talk for hours about the property space, and I wanted to dive in about so many things, about some advice for first home buyers and investors, and some of those ways where investors are getting unstuck, or things that are becoming overwhelming for first home buyers. And
I've been through 5 cycles. I built my first building at 18, and I'm now 52. So I've seen 1 or 2 cycles. I've seen 3 recessions and 5 booms.
Wow.
And I can
a pandemic.
And a pandemic. I'll talk you through them. I'll talk you through what repeats and what doesn't, what is common that in my observation to the cycles, what people should look for, what people should ignore. That's it.
Dr. Shane, I think the takeaway is, if I had spent less time asking about ancient Egyptian pyramid structures, we could have had some more takeaways, but already what you've given us has just been outstanding, and I can't thank you enough for coming on this podcast. And I would love to get you back on very soon to ask a whole array of more questions, but I won't take up more of your evening.
No, anytime. Your people can talk to my people. We'll get it organized.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
And Jimmy, it's been great fun. You're a fantastic interviewer. So I've had a great chat. I hope it's helpful and illuminating for somebody who listens to it.
In more ways than you can imagine. And I honestly can't thank you enough. And, for everybody listening, I think they would also say the same thing. Just keep him on, ask him more questions. And I would love to get you back on and pick your brains even more, because you're an expert in the field, and really appreciate your time this evening.
And as they say in French, à la prochaine fois. Until next time.
Until next time.
À la prochaine fois.
À la prochaine fois. Thank you so much, Dr. Shane. And until next time, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Bye.